Hey, glad you could make it. Today's lesson is going to be over the movement of energy through an ecosystem. Now, the original source of all energy in the ecosystems that we're going to discuss now is the sun. So I'm going to quickly sketch the sun right here. Sure. I'll put some rays around the sun. And remember that energy is being transferred to Earth through the process of radiation. And so the movement of energy through empty space is what that refers to. And when we think about energy and we think about everything that takes place on planet Earth, the first thing that we have to remember is that that energy has to be transferred into something that you and I can use. And we can use something called food or sugar or glucose. So we got to think about those organisms that produce food or sugar. And so I'm going to start by sketching out a little bit of grass down here, right? And in that grass, we'll put some taller plants, right? And at the top of the plants, just to give it a little bit of flair, I'll put some flowers, right? And on these plants, you're usually going to see some kind of leaves, right? And even over here, I could put a little bit more grass, and I could make a big tree. And with this tree, it would be covered with leaves, right? And those leaves are what can capture the energy from the sun. And so as energy comes towards Earth, it can be used to make a very important chemical reaction take place. What these two plants have in common is that they can both photosynthesize, right? They have a process called photosynthesis. That's that process that turns that solar energy into chemical or food energy. And so when a organism can do that, when a plant does that, it's called a producer. It produces its own food, right? Now, when these plants produce, guess what? They don't just do it for themselves. Well, really, that's what they want to do. But other organisms take advantage of these producers. And so, if you thought about maybe, I don't know, we could even think of like a little beetle, right? And maybe this is a herbivorous beetle. Wow, it looks like that's going to be a big beetle, right? Yeah, he's as big as that plant, right? Let me put some legs on this guy. And he's going to go over there and munch down on those plants. And so if he is going to take the energy from these plants, he's going to be called a consumer. Doesn't make his own food. He has to go out and get his food from another source. So I've got a producer, then I have a consumer. But guess what? You've got this consumer that's walking around, and sometimes there's bigger consumers that might think that that's a pretty tasty meal. And so over here, let's see what kind of organism I can draw now. Well, it's just going to be pretty suspect, I'm sure. Let's go ahead, put some weird little legs on this guy. Can you even come close to telling what I'm trying to draw? Maybe in a second you can. Whoa. Maybe not even when I'm finished. Look at this guy. Oh, I just can't stand to look at that head. It's terrible. Let me get rid of that real quick. Get a big long neck. Let me get my paintbrush pulled up again. Let's put a little bit more modest head on this guy. Alright, so it's supposed to be a lizard. Lizards love to eat beetles, and so the energy from the beetle can go to this consumer. Alright, so I've got two types of consumer. Now, this consumer that only eats plants is called a herbivore, right? But this consumer that loves eating other organisms besides plants, other consumers, is called a carnivore. carnivores, right? Now, this is one way I could illustrate the movement of energy through an ecosystem, but if you look over here, I can go a totally different route. And so I'm going to go ahead and draw an energy pyramid, right? Now I'll go ahead and label this. It's an energy pyramid. Yeah. I know it's really a triangle, but trust me, they call them energy pyramids. And so I've got 3 organisms that we're talking about, so I'm going to make this 3 levels. And I'm going to put my producers on bottom, my plants, my trees, my flowers, all of those things that can capture energy from the sun. And then I'm going to put my first consumer, and I'm going to call that a primary consumer. On the very top, I'm going to put the secondary consumer. Hopefully you get the idea that this is the primary and this is the secondary consumer. Now, if I was going to, I guess, assign an amount of energy to each one of these levels, the producers would make up 100% of the energy. But when consumers eat producers, they only get about 10%, right? And so the other 90% escapes into the atmosphere as heat. So we lose all of that energy. So if this went from 100 to 10, you got it. This will be 1%. And so you can tell that it takes a very large amount of producers to support a few secondary consumers. Hey, thanks for coming and watching this lesson. I'll have more about ecology in the lessons to come.